One more
Okay,
time.
now
One more
now
time.
now we see it. We see it.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are you trying to
Run,
get me in this
run attack again now,
newfangled
boy.
thing?
Just one more time now, boy.
In this newfangled thing, right? It's not rocket ship.
Ooh, now right.
Oh, see.
Now right.
All right. Just believe me that since I did this, it's just one query that got executed here. I think the more important thing is, let me see, am I started? The note, well, I'm doing this query here. I'm doing this query here. Asking for the count, asking for any, and then enumerating the products. So if I head over to my SQL, if you could see, I actually have 3 different SQL queries that got executed because of the deferred execution. So it actually query for this, and when I did the for each query. Deferred execution is awesome because it gives you greater performance in certain circumstances and worse in others when you don't know what you're doing. And I think I have written code like this many times where I ask for the count and I iterate and I ask if it have any and all kind of stuff. As I was saying, so Linq provides a consistent interface for querying objects, and I'm just going to show a bit of things that we used to do before Linq and how it works now. So let me just attach to this one. Like the only reason I'm doing this attach is so that I could get this cool space background using Windows Terminal because it seems fun. So I'm attached, boom bang. All right. So this is a very code heavy presentation. So I am sorry to some of you, but you can see what happened. So in the past, when we write in code to find something in a collection, we will essentially probably create something to collect the things that we find. We'll iterate over the collection. There's this products collection here with maybe these guys, and then we have a nice if statement in here, and we say if this thing equal this, add it to here. And that's kind of how we tend to find objects in the past. You rather write this code, and then when you wanted to display it or do some kind of fancy thing, you might write a next for loop, and you know to check, well, if the length is less than 1, I want to do something special, and then I'm gonna do a next thing if it's not. And doing that is like code that you'd have to write all the time. Just that same code over and over. So this is to produce that, but in using Linq, the code that actually you're going to write now is completely different. It's more declarative. It's a lot easier to understand. And the reason why it's called Linq on rocket ships is because of this wonderful symbol here. Some people call it goes to, others call it rocket ships. So that's kind of the genesis of the name of my talk. So this thing here is kind of the biggest part of Linq. It's like the thing that facilitates querying over collections. Essentially, it's a predicate, also known as a lambda, and we'll kind of go into it a little bit more. But I was just thinking about this very easy to understand code, versus this code. So so that's for like querying objects in memory. I just want to show you, querying SQL. So normally in the past, again, we would have written a nice SQL statement with whatever, and we have attaching a category ID, likely susceptible to SQL injection right now. And then we create a new connection, a new command, and and add the products to the thing, and that's that. And again, of course, the same old code that to join up an array. So again, now with SQL, and with Linq and EF, or entity framework for those who know, you have this, again, nice, very simple code. And if you look, the code is very similar to the previous objects code, which is in line with the the consistent interface across databases, across XML, across objects, and even your own custom data sources. So that's kind of a little history on where we were and where we are now with using Linq. So just any questions on, Linq and that history lesson? If anybody used to write code like that, that'd be cool to find out. Anything? Okay. So again, in order to support Linq, we had to make a number of language changes. So with the advent of Linq, there were several new additions to C# language and VB as well, I guess. But some, as well as we took advantage of some of the other things in the language. So it's gonna go through it. So lambda expressions, again, rocket ships is kind of the biggest thing. And we kind of just go through what a lambda expression is. So a lambda expression is, where are my notes? We don't have any notes again, guys, I'm sorry. So lambda expression, at the end of the day, is kind of an evolution of delegate, or anonymous delegate rather, or anonymous function, whatever you want to call it. And it's just, all it did is really kind of peel away all the complexities of a delegate, all the brackets and the word delegate, just to get it to this succinct level here, which is parameter goes to, yeah.
Ishmo, I feel like you need to explain what a delegate is.
Do I?
Kind of. I mean, you just kind of delve into it.
Sure. Okay. So I appreciate it, Ryan. I don't want to get into it necessarily, but all you can think of it is a delegate is just a handler to a function. Like, so it's just a function. Let's just think about it like that for now. It's just a function that you could name and you could pass around. Yeah. So if you write any JavaScript, it's kind of like that. That's how I kind of think about it. Because you could hold a function in your hand and then kind of assign it a variable and do things, which, it's magical. I don't know if that helped anybody. I hope it did.
So the x, the function x, what x, the function x is the actual body of the function means wherever the input is times 3, that kind of thing. So a triple is equal to what? So I feel like, well, maybe it's not important. It's just a function you pass now.
Yes. So as Ryan was saying, so this is just a short way of defining a function that you want to be assignable to a variable. And that's something new that, well, you could have done it with delegates and stuff before, but it's a lot cleaner now. So this X here represents the parameter list. So you could actually have multiple parameters separated by commas and surrounded by parentheses. And you could think of this as well. These things are going to be applied to this function body here. So this defines what is going to happen. They actually throw away the return statement. So all it's saying is x times return x times 3. So you could put the return statement and you'll see it lower down, but it's just like they just kind of clean it up and remove all the ceremony around the function just to make it nice and clean. And you can assign it to this type, and we'll talk a little bit about that type as well a little bit. And since you have this function in hand, you can, reference it and call it. So when you call a triple and you pass 5, you're going to assign 5 to x over here, and then you're going to run 5 times 3, and you'll get a triple. Another way to look at the function is where you can actually have a function body, and you can actually have a number of statements in here as well. But this is just a longer declaration of a function, or lambdas as well. There's an action type, which is a lambda that does not return anything. So you can have parameters in here, but this is just an example of it not accepting any parameters and just doing an action. But that's what actions are. And then you have the amazing expression, which is the basis for a lot of the remote providers like Linq to SQL or EF Core and stuff like that. And what this does is it essentially allows you to turn code into data, which from my point of view is brilliant. So what does that mean? Essentially taking this lambda expression here, or this function, and in this case is a predicate, saying if age is, essentially if the person is a teenager. And what that's doing, because you're assigning to the expression type, the compiler is not going to turn it into actual code. It's going to actually create a data structure in memory with different parts, with the expression itself broken down into its various parts. So you can now interrogate that data structure to get information about it and then do fun things. So this used in EF, entity framework. You're gonna find out this expression and you're going to actually use it to construct a SQL statement. And this is just kind of a look at how you would do something like that. Depending on it, I'll send you guys some links on how you can do it. It seems very complicated, but interesting nonetheless. So if you want to get the parameters of it, you can get the parameters, and then you can get the body of the expression. You can get the left side expression, and the return type and stuff like that. So let me just run this to the end so you could see a little bit of the thing. So obviously the triple thing is, not a big deal, but the expression is the best part. So you can see the expression type is a lambda, the parameter is S, the type is a student, the left side is this, and you get the expression type and you get the right side and the return type. So it's actually very cool being able to write code and then in the code actually have a data structure that you could interrogate to do a myriad of things. So I think if Joshua and Niall recall their CFP life, what they're doing is the same thing. They're building an expression builder, and the expression builder is exactly this: is expression. They could have probably used this class to instead of like coming up with their own class to represent the expression. It's essentially just left and right expressions and a binder, and it's a big, wonderful tree that you're going to visit to execute said expression. Yeah, crazy stuff, I know. So that's me on just the expression. I don't think I have much more talking about expressions and stuff in the university talk. I can't recall. I have no notes. So any questions about the lambda? Is it confusing? The thought about having code as data, does that seem weird or anything to anybody?
Having the code as data improves like speed of the application.
No, it's not necessarily speed of the application, but it allows you to write code to describe your intent. So this is what it's doing. This is describing my intention. Yeah, I want to find out if this person is still a teenager. So I just describe it in code. And now I can take that code and deconstruct it and do fancy things with it. And one of the fancy things is, well, I can take this code that I've written as C# and convert it to SQL. So what and the entity framework, which I'm sure you've heard of it over the course of the years, that's exactly what it does. So it takes this code that you wrote in C# in a very clear, very understandable, and one particular language, which is C#. And because the code is data, we can actually take that code and translate it into another language, which is SQL. So it's a very fun and interesting use of code.
Right. Okay, got you.
Yeah.
So how does that contrast with the whole idea of not hard coding data items, generally speaking, or is this very far from that concept?
A little bit.
It's a different application altogether.
Yeah, so we're not hard coding. So normally when you talk about hard coding, you're talking about I can't even think of an example at the moment. Like you're hard coding some piece of data that likely could change. In this instance, we expect that the logic here, which is still a teenager, never going to change. We're never going to change the logic about if a teenager is still a teenager because it's fixed. So it's not necessarily hard coding. It's just defining the logic in code, which is what we do every day. So the hard coding might be, well, in the text, we put the connection string in text in the program, and we can't edit it without having to recompile the program. So that's kind of more along the lines of the hard coding part of it.
So you won't use this, for example, to implement business rules in a particular scenario. Coming to mind, obviously, is the work we did where they had a bunch of business rules managing beneficiaries and who they could choose, etc. This won't be an application of.
But it can be. It can be. It can be. It depends on how you decide to implement it. So you would. So if you want to be able to change the business rules more easily outside of the application. So if the application running and you want to be able to change the business rules, you'll do something different. But you could still utilize using this expression to expression builder as part of your setup. But you would probably want to take. So if this was a calculation for some payment, and that payment could change, then you'll use a fancy rules engine and all that kind of fun stuff. Yeah. All right, I'm moving swiftly along. So another language support feature would be iQueryable and iEnumerable. So iEnumerable we are custom with, but I think the important thing is the iQueryable, which would allow us to push computation onto the remote provider. And obviously I had a thing about remote providers, but here we are. Should have listened to Erwin and get 3 screens. So let's think about this. Linq works on 2 objects. It works on iEnumerable, so stuff in memory. So we have a student list, it's in there, and you have these methods that that are available that you run against the collection in memory. Linq also provides remote provider facilities. When I say remote provider, I'm talking about being able to connect a SQL server, for example, and run queries on that, or files, or other various types of remote providers. And obviously the most famous one is the entity framework that we use. And the iQueryable interface allows you to essentially push the computation onto the server. So let me just show the example that I'm getting at here. Is if we weren't using the iQueryable interface here, when we said context of products here, it will compute it and it will do the where, and then it will pull everything into memory, and then it will take 10 items. But because of the iQueryable, we do actually have to execute this first, and we can allow for the SQL server to actually take care of that computation.
And are you taking questions now, or you want us to kind of wait?
No, I take questions all the time. Hopefully you'll get
that point you're making there on iQueryable. Is it that products is the iQueryable item in this example?
Yes. Well, the where returns are iQueryable rather.
So then, is that products would be a full list of products? If you understand what? Just
So,
to look at the example you give. Yeah.
So I think, well, I'll get into it a little bit later, which is deferred execution. So with Linq, this iQueryable thing actually isn't executed at this point in time. All you have is really a query in hand.
So then to that point on the query, right? That query is generated by whom? The server or the client?
The query is generated. I'm not sure what you mean exactly. So the when you call products that where the EF has a EF remote provider class that is in part of the .NET Core. I guess it'll come in as a NuGet package for .NET Core. That will hold the query. So he have a logic to deal with essentially it's just a query, and he's going to, when you execute it, he's going to translate that into a SQL query and execute at that time. So it's not like SQL Server creating a query. It is EF, the remote provider, going to translate your expression into a SQL query and hold it. But it's still holding it until you execute it.
Not bad.
Yeah. So that's the reasoning for the different. I know it used to have a thing about iQueryable versus iEnumerable. I apologize, I had some more stuff in the notes, but here we are. We're moving forward. So this is essentially the SQL query that got generated by EF. It's pretty straightforward. You're taking a top 10. I guess it's a take everything. And this is your predicate here, all translated into SQL via the Linq remote provider. Yes, step forward again. So another language support would be extension methods. Again, very cool stuff. So the platform team might be familiar with this this script here. I hit them a cross-site scripting thing, and I forget to delete it, and everybody was getting this alert when they log into our portal. So using extension methods are able to, on any string, so this is a string literal, but on any string it's a variable or whatever, I can actually attach this HTML and code method, which actually does not exist on the string type. So let me see if we head down there. I hope most people are familiar with these extensions, but what it does is allow you to attach any method to any type, whether or not it's sealed or you have access to it or not. And you do that by a static class and a static method and the this keyword. So what this doing is saying attach it to all strings. And to include it, you need to just use include namespace. Some other cool thing is you could write cool APIs like this. You could say like 5 minutes ago, which will send you which again is like this. It's in extension methods. You could get 5 days ago. That kind of Ruby-esque style of coding. And so as you can see, this is the extension methods get run. So the reason extension methods were around were I'm going to say invented. I'm not a fan of that, but created rather, I guess, was so that you could attach these methods to existing types without the. So if you had chosen an interface to do it, then every class that implemented, when they make changes, like they would have to implement the new types and so on, and it will kind of break everything when you introduce new things. But going the extension method route, they were able to just attach methods onto the existing types, and they could kind of add and modify without the risk of breaking things going forward. So it's a kind of cool thing. I'm a fan of extension methods, but they could get wild. So again, this one is, shout out to Marilyn. That one performance the orphan code and the anonymous delegate had. So another language feature, or rather, this is 2 language features that help support Linq, is the var type, which we stole from those functional dynamic type languages, and the anonymous type. So with the var type, you can now assign any type to a var, and the compiler will infer the type based on the right hand assignment. So in this case here, you see, well, you could assign a student, but you can also use this shorter notation to assign a student over to the thing. So it is cool because it's less typing, which is fun. But the real benefit comes with when they use the var keyword with the anonymous types. And again, this was also support for Linq. So you don't have to create a new type to represent some data structure that you want. Previously, without this anonymous type, you would have like millions of different classes that just had 2 properties, 3 properties that you wanted to return. So if it was a student model, you'd have to create a class student model with just first name, last name, ID. And you'd have to say new student model and do all that. But with the introduction of the anonymous types, you were able to just say new and put any properties that you want into there, and the var keyword used to be able to hold that type. So what happens in reality is compiler, again, doing magic. It's actually going to create a type for you with some random name, and so it actually is a real type with a generated name that it actually stored in here. So that's why it could infer the type here. And again, it's useful when you're doing your Linq stuff. So you could say, I could project it into this new type that describes my query. So, if you was writing a SQL query, you would have, say select ID and first name instead of star, and you'll be able to get your type. So this is again just making things a lot simpler to utilize the Linq query. And these just to know, these things are read only, so you can't like go and assign student.id to a different thing right now.
Owen have 2 hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need 15 monitors. Talk now.
Oh,
I can't read no chat on it.
yeah, how long they were?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I have no notes.
What's the question? I forget it. Oh, I remember. And then since you mentioned this clear language borrowing taking place between C# and others, right? You mentioned Ruby, you mentioned
Ruby
just
and,
functional languages, things like that,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
When should we begin the campaign to get rid of var on the whole?
Get rid of var?
Yeah, as in just don't use nothing at all. Just say student equals new student.
Just so A equal new student? That's what you mean?
Yeah, and they go anyway.
That sounds good. I like it. I imagine you being a bit,
Slightly.
How would you know? Is
Slightly
it a variable, a local variable, or a global variable? What's the scope of this variable if you haven't explicitly declared it?
You declare that in the usings at the top.
I declare you to.
Hey, what about this recording? We go and share to all the students in the world, right?
What?
But sorry, that I was supposed to say afterwards.
Oh,
but
okay.
that's a really good point, Ryan. You might have to use some kind of convention if you didn't have the ability to scope in that way. You know, just a thought experiment, I think. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, so that is, var the anonymous type. I guess is, as I was saying, is just used mostly for selects to be able to just get the only information that you want. And again, so if this was a SQL query and we were going into EF, when you do the select method, the EF remote provider is going to create a SQL query that's saying select ID, comma, name, or well, rather select student ID as ID, comma, select student name as name from student, because you're using the select function. So I mean, again, cool stuff. So I guess this is just a little display of, var the anonymous type, which is going through all the students. Another thing is the query syntax. We rarely use this. I don't know how many people actually use this, but initially this was like the biggest thing of all time, I thought, at least, where you could write a SQL-like language in C#. So the stuff that we are accustomed using is extension methods, but this is the query language. So you'll say from S in collection where you predicate, and then you could project it into this new type again using the anonymous types. So I mean, we don't use it often. I think I've seen it like once, and obviously I wrote it. I don't know if anybody else is right those things. Any question on the query syntax stuff? Has anybody written query syntax before? Let me see if I'm, like, for production code, not just playing around. All right.
Like I saw.
Sorry, yes. We use it all the time.
Do we?
At least I've seen it. I've written code like that. We don't use that kind of code from where select.
I feel like I saw some code like that, but like I don't know why I would use that over proper Linq.
Weird flex, but okay.
Okay, Boomer.
How you mean? All right. I think hopefully we can get it. It have a nice use that I saw. it was a lot easier. A lot easier when the query gets a lot more complicated, because you could do cool things like you could add a let keyword in there, which you could assign a variable. So you could do a whole set of thing, create a subquery, and then assign it to a variable. So, sorry?
I just want to switch back the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, so you could add a let variable and just do subqueries and kind of fun stuff. So, all right. And again, it seems that I don't have a breakpoint for this, so I'm gonna just go, yeah. Again, one note. So this is a generic class. It's very simplified. This was from a code. It's very early on. I think it predates Linq. It's just a generic class. Generic's awesome. It allows you to write algorithms without knowing any type. I find it's, awesome. But this class kind of meh. Oh, maybe this might help. So again, this is like, well, again, before Linq. So you have to do some weird things. So this would say, well, if two ranges overlap each other, and the range could be of any type. So it could be integers, it could be dates, it could be all kind, and it allows you to ignore the type and just focus on the algorithm that you're trying to implement. Which, again, we use generics. So anytime you see these angle brackets, it's generics, and you can specify types that you want. So this class could accept date times or bools or whatever. Which bools would be weird, but they allow you to defer the specification of the type till later on, which is very cool. And we use it every day. So you're in a list of strings or a list of customers or products or whatever. I had the yield, so I didn't get a chance to do the yield thing. But this is like an example of it. How do you describe yield by? Yield essentially allows you to do, oh man, it's cool. It allows you to do deferred, deferred execution really. So essentially, so all where clauses and stuff, or where extensions and things, you probably utilize yield for the IEnumerable extensions. So yield essentially just
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry, you could repeat that just to understand the use case one more time. Is yield literally, or let me just restate it in the form of my question for clarity, because I think I've never used it, right?
Okay.
Is yield, when you write a for loop, and you found the thing you're looking for, so you would break and then carry on with your life. Is yield another version of that?
It could be. So you could actually, instead of doing yield return, you could do yield break, but not really. Yield is normally used for enumerators or iterators, one or the other. I can't remember. I'm sorry. But what it does is essentially, when you reach to this yield line, it's going to return to the caller, so that the caller will do whatever it does. So, for example, imagine this thing is in a for, being called by a for loop, this query here. So you for over this query, and when you reach the particular item, you're going to hit here, and it's going to return control to the calling code. And then you could do whatever you want, and then you go back over the loop, and then it's going to come back to this code and execute. And what it does is, I think it builds like a kind of state machine to keep track of where you are in the enumeration. So,
And I
so
sorry, yeah.
Mhm.
I do understand what you're saying, but
That's okay. Um, that's okay. Niall could help me out maybe.
yeah, I mean, anybody use it before?
Niall, Nico?
Yeah, I use it, but I can't explain it.
Because
I just know I have
yeah, go
a
ahead.
loop, and I want to
Mhm.
get a list from it. And like, as I guess so I find myself writing this kind of stupid code. You have a loop, and inside a loop, you're gonna make a list of something, and then you're gonna make a for loop, and then you're gonna add to that list within the inner one. So instead of making some separate list inside of there, I just return yield, and you'll get the enumerable of the thing that you wanted. But I can't really explain yield too much. Sorry.
Yeah. So, great. So is essentially to allow for the deferred execution. What it's doing is it allows you to return uh iterator or slash enumerator. So it's not going to execute until you execute it. So until you do the for loop, for loop for each is just a syntactic sugar on a while loop or something like that. Like the compiler going to compile it into a while loop and then have move next and whatever. With a get iterator or get enumerator that move next and stuff like that. So essentially that's what the yield keyword doing, it providing the enumerator for you. So that it's not like, just like Niall saying, so it's not like you had to create a new list here, right? And then you for each, and then you add each item to that list, and then you return that list, and then you're going to go over each item in the list again when you're enumerating it. Essentially, every time you
Get an
only doing
item,
it
you
once.
can work with the item.
Yeah, exactly. You only work on it once, basically.
I guess okay. So the scenario, I haven't really seen a lot of scenarios where I needed that. Like it almost feels as if you get a decent chunk of an object that you could go do something with in the meantime while you are okay.
Right. So,
Okay, so okay,
literally,
I get it. Yeah.
if we look at, like, I believe the actual enumerable where the where extension works exactly like that. So if we look at the then objects method here, right, and you have a for each, and you say, well, if this is true, add it, is exactly what it is. You're adding it to this thing, and then you're actually going to have to go over it again and do a next thing. If you had yield returned, you would immediately be able to act on it if this was a different method or something like that, as opposed to going over the list again.
Right. So
Yeah.
as you get the item, do something with it.
Yeah. I feel like I'm nowhere. So that was yield, and I'm just going to talk about the query operators very quickly. Again, Linq is awesome. So if you guys see anything that you want to know about, I'm going to talk about a couple that we probably don't use often. But if you all know some of them that you care about, you could ask. So like, and I just kind of categorize them by their function. So order by, group by, to look up, pretty cool. I like the generation stuff with the range. I'll show that. Projection, which is essentially just think select, instead of select star, it's a select ID, cover name, etc. We're showing that on the quantifiers, all contains good stuff. Set, again, stuff that we don't really use as much, I think, at least.
And then while we see this stuff,
Mhm.
there is a consumer-oriented notion to everything you're showing here, right? Here's what you could use in Linq. But do you have a take around what how we should be thinking of building our own providers? Should we be trying to build our own providers? Is that a fool's errand? What is your thoughts on that?
I have some code that somebody that's very complicated. It's interesting. That's definitely one of the things I would have liked to have done. Especially for QuickBooks, just try it as a thing. I don't think we need to necessarily because, well, at the end, they are providers for what we want. We want to hit SQL, we want to hit Cosmos. They already are providers for that. We could do a provider for like the API maybe. They don't have necessarily providers for web services necessarily, but so something like that we could do, and it's an interesting thought experiment which I will be looking into, but not at the moment. So yeah, anybody want to know about any extension method that they never hear about or that they're confused by? I wanted to get a cool table, but you know, my command line styling not really that great.
You try CSS?
Again, so I had a list of them, so I'm just going to type range. Hopefully this works. Yeah. Why am I not able to type? What's happening? What's going on? Oh, I already did a thing. Oh, it's on pause. So I guess I wanted to show some cool stuff. You know, writing code with reflection. So I took text and I used Ryan's favorite magical tool called Nimble Text. I hope people use it. It makes my life easier. So let me see. And it's just basically just a text generator. But I use it often to generate repetitive code. So you know, let me just pretend. All right, let me just take half of this. So I can do cool things like I can say.
And then I think Naya mentioned to look up and the set stuff, right?
Huh?
In terms of examples, in terms of example code, the set stuff and to look up.
Okay. So if you can see at the bottom here, I just essentially just from a list I just generate new object creations and stuff like that. So it's very useful. So I use that to do all this stuff. I'll show you the actions stuff as well. So just wanted to show you guys that. So now I wanted to look up. Oh, look at that. I hope I spell that right. If I don't spell it right, it's gonna bust, by the way. Got it.
So we have a 73% chance of busting.
Well, 100%, bro. 100%. 100.
You're still on the Nimble Text, you know?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. It didn't bust. It didn't bust. It was fine.
Nice.
The odds in your favor, Smoothie. Should go to your auto.
Bye.
You seem to be lucky today.
Huh?
You seem to be lucky today.
I am not. How am I lucky?
It's still in Nimble Text, you know, if you think we're seeing it too much.
No, I don't want you to see. I spelled it wrong and bust the app. It's like, come on.
Ah, okay.
So I had to restart.
See
Like
all
I
that
literally.
too.
Huh?
See all that.
If I
Share
assume
your
Keisha talking
experiences.
because I don't understand.
I done you.
All right. So see this how this works here. To look up. Okay. So yeah, this to look up is it basically converting converting your object list into a lookup type, which is very similar to a dictionary. So it's key value pairs. So it's not too fun. It's just, well, this will be my key, and then this is my resultant. So let me hit 5.
And he set stuff too if you have time.
Sorry.
And he set
And it-
stuff. If you could show that as well, like the unions and all that other fun stuff.
Okay.
That lookup stuff real cool for like drop down list and things.
I guess. I haven't thought about it. So you could do two dictionary, but I guess two lookup is a giving you a grouping. It seems that I've never run this two lookup code. I stole most of the code from the internet.
Oh, so dictionaries for you have you might have unique keys.
Yeah.
Whereas to look up might give you a non-unique engagement.
Just rocket ships for you guys, since you know. So I'm sure I ran the to look up, because I think I had the same thought. But yeah, it'll literally give you'll get your grouping and your various keys that various values that fit that grouping. It's all of 229. What setting you want to see now? Let's just pick one now.
Best one, union.
Oh my god.
Or
Yeah,
intersect though. Intersect kind of interesting.
Intersect. Yeah, intersect.
All
Why not?
right. I'm not going to type. Like, I literally know this was going to happen, and I was like, I should fix that. But I chose not to. So again, intersect is, well, you have two collections, that plan 1, plan 2, and you want to find which items intersect with both, right? Let's see, yeah. So you can see intersect. Well, apparently Mercury, Earth, and Jupiter all intersect with each other, with the two in between the two lists. And of course, the same with distinct and union is a join. Except is, well, I want everything in this one except in that one. You know. I wanted to show range just because it's vibes. So what range allows you to do, just enumerable that range, you
you
could
have
just.
a reminder on your if you wanted to hide it.
Oh God! Oh, it's my fault. Okay, about it. So you can essentially just generate a list based on a range. It's coming handy every so often when you need to, let me say, generate 100 numbers randomly, as opposed to typing out 1 to 100 or a for loop to create the 100 numbers. You could just generate this here. So I guess this one does what you wanted to do, and I guess you could apply it. Another one. How to spell it right? I'm sorry. Okay, aggregate. Aggregate is a cool thing. It's like that map reduce thing. I guess is the reduce function, or you could call it an accumulator. So you could use it for sum as well. But what it does is essentially takes it gives you the first item and the second item, and then it runs a function and then returns the result of said function as S1, and then gives you, I guess in this case it'll be third item in the list, runs the function again, does a computation, and then gives you back that as S1, and then you get the other thing. It's cool. Anybody wanted to see anything else that important? I'm also over, so I mean, I'm sorry. I have, what else do I have to talk about? I have the food execution, which I think is important for people to know about. So I could run through it really, really quickly, like in 5 minutes. I think it's a bit eye-opening when you look at it. So again, this comes back to where the yield stuff. So it's likely, as I said, we're using yield, but when you call where, it doesn't actually execute your query as yet. It's only when you enumerate it or you call some specific methods like to list and to dictionary, etc., that your query actually executes. And that's good to know. In this case, let me get you here. So I just did a where, and I think student lists have like, where the age is more than 25. So it's only giving me Bill and Ron. What's interesting is I ask for student lists where the same thing, the same exact query this time. But what I'm doing now is I'm actually adding a new student after I ask the where. And as you can see, it actually added the other student when I enumerated it. So this is just an example of the deferred execution. It's like, well, I actually not giving you back the list of things here. I'm just giving you back that state machine the enumerator, and we're not enumerating it yet. I'm able to add things. I could actually do more queries on top of it to change the whole thing, and then actually execute that query. So it's important to understand this concept, especially when we get into Linq to EF. And this is kind of the thing that I want to show. So just play this guy. So this is this is me getting a list of items, but I'm actually executing it immediately as opposed to using the deferred execution. So to list says execute immediately, and then I'm going to ask for any with this price and the count, and guys, I apologize. I was showing you this and I was talking about that. But as I was saying, so this actually executes immediately, and then I'm asking for anything and the count. So let me just run this and bring up this guy. Damn you. So I didn't start the profile. It's very sad. But let's just believe me that since I did this, it's just one query that got executed here. I think the more important thing is, let me see, am I started? So note, well, I'm doing this query here. Asking for the count, asking for any, and then enumerating the products. So if I head over to my SQL, if you could see, I actually have 3 different SQL queries that got executed because of the deferred execution. So it actually query for this, and when I did the for each query. Deferred execution is awesome because it gives you greater performance in certain circumstances and worse in others when you don't know what you're doing. And I think I have written code like this many times where I ask for the count and I iterate and I ask if it have any, so it's just something that you need to note. I'll probably share some more later on. I have some more cool stuff as well. That is it. I'm sorry. Goodbye.
All right, cool. Thank you, Rocket Smith.
Yeah, I guess you could ask any questions before you have any questions until maybe a minute.
I feel like one of the takeaways, Anand, is being very careful about saying to list on entity framework type activities. Like one of the big takeaways.
Well, I think that I think the reverse is true, and what you are saying is true, but I think the reverse is true. I think you need to be careful of executing, if you're using specifically EF, you need to be wary of using using extension methods that use deferred execution, like where, all these things, because you could end up actually. I don't know if you noticed what I actually execute. Three queries were executed. When I said 3 SQL queries, when I asked for any, count, and where, 3 different SQL queries were executed. And that's because of the deferred execution. That's how it is implemented. When you ask for it, it's going to do 3. As opposed to if you had done 2 lists on it, it would only done it once. The 2 lists is another problem when you have too much data and then you 2 lists on it and stuff like that. So it's a whole other problem. But I think it's actually the reverse. All right. Thank you. Merry Christmas.
All right, cool. Thanks, man. Should I the outro? Yeah.